Thanks for joining us from the Ohio AgNet Voice You Know With the News You Trust studio, sponsored by the Family Forest Carbon Program, where we help family forest owners get paid to improve the health of their woods. Coming up on the calendar, listen, Tuesday of next week, we'll get an update from Ohio Corn and Wheat, and on Monday, celebrate the beginning of National Dairy Month during the month of June with the American Dairy Association Mideast. Find out more on their website at www.drinkmilk.com. Let's check in with our weekly update from the Ohio Soybean Council and your checkoff dollars at work. Here's Dusty Sonnenberg.
I'm joined today by Dr. Horacio Lopez Nicora. Horacio is our soybean pathologist and nematologist. Horacio, it's been an interesting planting season this year so far. On again, off again. Some folks got out there early and really have nice-looking crops. Others got in maybe a little bit later. Crops are struggling from the wet weather, and some, that crop is still in the bag. It hasn't even hit the ground yet. Let's start off and talk about the growing season and what we find when we're out there scouting some of those newly emerged seedlings.
Definitely. Plants are emerging, and unfortunately, some are not. And that's sometimes a big concern, what's going on. And what I do normally is I focus on pathogens that may affect either the seed or the seedling as they're coming up, or just after emergence, and pathogens that may affect those seedlings and unfortunately kill them and reduce stunt by doing so. You mentioned persistent cool and wet conditions across Ohio, very wet, and when we encounter poorly drained soil, we run into those fields with seeding water and cool soil temperatures. So that's just conducive environmental conditions for seedling diseases if we have a susceptible host, a susceptible soybean plant, and if we have the pathogen or pathogens, right? That seeding water always reminds us of the water molds. We have the Pythium and Phytophthora that thrive in poorly drained, compacted soil. So that's the main thing that we should think when we suspect seedling disease.
Again, my guest today is Dr. Horacio Lopez Nicora, soybean pathologist and nematologist at The Ohio State University with OSU Extension. And today's update brought to you by the Ohio Soybean Council and your soybean checkoff.
And thanks, Dusty. Today's weather brought to you by Seed Consultants. Simply better performance online at seedconsultants.com. Here's the forecast.
Partly to mostly sunny and dry for your Thursday, but we do have some more moisture trying to head toward the state of Ohio. I'm Chief Meteorologist Ryan Martin. Let's take a look at that Ohio Ag weather update. We'll look to the west here today. Even though we're looking sunny and pleasant, we are also watching a significant area of shower and thunderstorm activity exit the Central Plains, move across Missouri, and right into the Ohio River Valley. Mostly, we're seeing this system that's headed towards us be an Ohio and Tennessee Valley kind of system. But the northern fringe of it is what I think we really need to keep an eye on as we move from the overnight tonight into tomorrow. Hit and miss of scattered showers. I'm going to say as far north as I-70, but I honestly think it's going to be a little bit farther south than that. Anywhere from 1/4 to 3/4 of an inch of precipitation. It could be some nice rains for tomorrow morning and midday down near the Ohio River. Farther north of I-70 for sure, just partly to mostly sunny skies and a nice setup, completely dry. More rain can be falling down south overnight tonight and tomorrow. Going into the weekend, well, we deal first with a little disturbance coming southward out of Ontario, out of Michigan, and across Lake Erie. That happens overnight, Friday night into early Saturday morning. Clouds and a few spits and sprinkles, nothing really dramatic, but it's not completely dry. I do think that it is gone by near or just after sunrise on Saturday, and we spend the rest of Saturday turning out partly to mostly sunny, warmer, and dry. We keep that pattern going through Sunday, through Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday of next week. By the time we get to Friday the 6th, I think we're looking at a fairly significant front developing just to our west, but it may not put down its first drop here until Friday night and into then Saturday the 7th. Right now I'm looking at a frontal boundary there that can give us anywhere from 1/4 to 3/4 of an inch with coverage around 80% of the state, but it's not going to be before that we see anything significant. I'm Ryan Martin.
And thanks, Ryan. Average retail prices for 7 of the 8 major fertilizers were higher compared to last month. Prices of 3 of those were significantly higher in May, according to sellers surveyed by DTN. Leading the way higher again for prices was urea. The nitrogen fertilizer was up 13%. Both UAN 28 and UAN 32 were more expensive compared to last month, with UAN 28 up 9%, while UAN 32 was up 10%. 4 fertilizers had slightly higher prices, including DAP, MAP, Potash, and 1034O, and Hydrous fertilizer was slightly lower compared to the prior month. Looking back a year, 5 fertilizers are now higher in price compared to 1 year earlier. DAP is up 2%, 1034O up 4%, UAN 28 is 15% higher, and urea and UAN 32 are up 18%. The remaining 3 fertilizers are lower. MAP and anhydrous are both 1% less expensive, while potash is 8% lower compared to last year. And let's check in with Joel Panorwood. He leads us into a conversation on the do's and don'ts of soil moisture.
As farmers in Ohio know all too well, it's been a wet spring. From a soil health perspective, how does getting into the field too early affect that? And how do we make the call of when's the right time to plant while not waiting too long, while still safeguarding soil health? In this featured audio, Ohio's Country Journal's Brianna Smith and Ohio AgNet's Joe Everett talk with Manbir Rakar, Assistant Professor of Soil Fertility and Nutrient Management at The Ohio State University.
I know this is important to plant in optimal window zone, which is mid-April to mid-May in Ohio, but it's not even ideal to get into the field to plant in wet conditions. So at our farms, ideally we want soil matrix to be 50% solid material, sand, soil, clay, organic matter, living organisms. But 50% of the soil matrix should have pore space where air and water just flows in and out. When we go out in the field, especially in the wet soil conditions, that wet soil condition is very susceptible to all kind of soil structure degradation and compaction. So whenever we go out in the field with the heavy equipment, soil structure, soil aggregates are damaged, and that pore space, that 50%, the ideal pore space, that is reduced, which ultimately leads to issues like compaction, reduce water infiltration, drainage issues, reduce aeration issues, which are very critical for all kind of biological activities. And then ultimately that has effect on how nutrients dynamics happen in the soil as well. I mean, overall, just going into the field when the soils are wet has immediate and long-lasting effect on how soil functions that ultimately decides our crop yields.
The conversation continues in the full featured audio online today at ohioagnet.com about what is the trade-off between getting in those fields sooner than later, but also not sacrificing that soil structure with compaction and more. That plus some field-ready tips on how to check if your soil is ready to plant online at ohioagnet.com. I'm Joel Panorwood reporting.
And thanks, Joel. Oil futures rose Wednesday morning on reports the White House is considering additional sanctions on Russia in the wake of ramped-up attacks on Ukraine. Russian crude oil accounts for about 11% of global supply. The New York MEX traded July delivery up 97 cents a barrel, and the ICE Brent for July delivery rose 94 cents per barrel. The U.S. dollar index strengthened by 0.310, bringing it to 99.735. CNN on Tuesday reported President Trump's considering additional sanctions on Russia, including secondary sanctions on buyers of Russian oil. A corresponding bipartisan Senate bill which sets a 500% tariff on imports from countries buying Russian energy products so far has 83 sponsors. Past sanctions, embargoes, and price caps on Russian oil have dented production and supported price. The resulting steep discount on Russian oil, however, made it an attractive feedstock for Asian refiners, and a large fleet of shadow tankers is helping to circumvent sanctions. So far, in 2025, Russian crude oil production averaged 9 million barrels per day, about 1 million barrels per day below the antebellum, the before the war output. Stay tuned, back with more after this.
Many drugs, like cocaine, methamphetamine, and non-prescription pills, are often cut with dangerous opioids like fentanyl. As a result, nearly 14 Ohioans die daily from unintentional overdoses. That's why it's important to carry naloxone, such as Narcan, a life-saving medication that blocks the effects of fentanyl and other opioids. Over the last 5 years, naloxone has saved over 83,000 lives. Help save lives and visit naloxone.ohio.gov to learn more and find free naloxone. Remember, if you see an overdose occurring, always call 911.
Attention construction pros. Purple Wave Auction brings quality equipment to your fingertips. Join our bi-weekly online auctions featuring dozers, excavators, loaders, and more. We provide detailed listings, photos, and seller contact info. Inspect online or in person. With our no reserve policy, every item sells to the highest bidder. Visit purplewave.com today and see why informed builders choose Purple Wave. Transparent processes, real deals. Your next great purchase awaits. purplewave.com.
Today's market analysis is brought to you by the Louis Dreyfus Company. Excited to be building the newest state-of-the-art soybean crush facility in Upper Sandusky, Ohio. For marketing information of your beans to LDC, call 574-566-2113. With our market analysis, here's Ryan Martin.
Grain markets finished the Wednesday session with a little bit of weakness. We were led by double-digit losses in soybeans. Wheat markets tried to hold their own, fractionally lower in Chicago and Kansas City through most of the day, fractionally higher to about 5 to 6 higher in Minneapolis. The corn market down anywhere from 2 to 4 cents from September forward. July was a little bit of an outlier, trending lower. What were the stories that were in the marketplace yesterday? Well, the very first crop conditions scores came out. Well, corn crop condition scores came out in that delayed report on Tuesday. And the initial corn and spring wheat ratings were lower than expected, mostly due to cool temperatures out there. 45% good to excellent on spring wheat, 68% good to excellent in corn. Most of the market watchers were expecting 73% or better in corn. That was a little bit of a surprise and likely reflects the lack of heat across main sections of the Midwest and Northern Plains. Ohio has been experiencing excessive rainfall, which slowed seeding progress. We're finally starting to try and catch up in parts of Ohio here as we move through the next week or so. As we take a look at the other stories in the marketplace yesterday, well, we go back to the seeding progress. Farmers have seeded now 87% of intended corn and spring wheat and 76% of intended soybean acres. So that's going to be, well, kind of pick and shovel work, I think, here through the rest of the year. The ratings in hard red winter wheat fell as Oklahoma wheat suffered from excessive rainfall and worsening leaf diseases. Paris wheat futures were up. We could not see that translate into a better day in the U.S. wheat markets, I think mostly due to the pressure that came on corn and soybeans. Showers are expected to come into the Central Plains and into the Western Corn Belt again later this weekend and through most of next week. Plenty of moisture coming into those areas. I'm Ryan Martin.
And thanks, Ryan. We'll have the overnight figures after this.
If your summer road trip leads you to Ohio's farm country, be sure to share the road with Ohio's farmers. Farm machinery moves slowly, makes wide turns, and needs extra space to avoid obstacles like mailboxes and guardrails. Let's all be mindful and make sure everyone gets home safe and sound this year. This message brought to you by the Ohio AgNet, OSU Extension Ag Safety and Health Team, and this station.
Today's market is brought to you by Seed Consultants. Simply better performance online at seedconsultants.com. Overnight at the open, July corn up 1/4 cent at $4.51 1/4. December unchanged at $4.43 1/2. March also unchanged at $4.58 1/4. The July soybeans are up 2 3/4, trading $10.51 1/4 cent. November up 3 1/4 at $10.40 3/4. January up 3 1/2 at $10.54 1/4 cent. July wheat's up 2 1/2 at $5.32 3/4. September up 2 1/2 at $5.48. Carried all the way to December, you're up 3 at $5.71 3/4. In livestock, June cattle closed down $1.20 at $213.92. August down $1.12 at $208.17. The June lean hogs were up $1.17 at $100.27. July up $1.15 at $103.30, and August up $1.35 at $103.52. Now, the September feeder cattle got hit down $2.77 at $294.47. October down $2.82 at $292.52. Thanks for joining us. Have a great day, everyone. I'm Dale Minyo. This is the Ohio AgNet.